Somebody says, your sample students all seem so extraordinary. Am I just not digging deep enough? Well, I don't know, maybe. and if that's true, then try these exercises and let me know how it goes. Now, these aren't the only exercises, but these exercises seem to get kids to go deeper. Also, I work with a ton of students every year, meaning like these are like that student, the breaking up with mom essay, she was in a group of 30 students that I did a 4-day workshop for over the course of 4 weeks. And not all the essays were that good, but that one really jumped out at me. So do all of my students end up writing, and that was, by the way, the breaking up with mom essay, the first draft was like a first draft. She's like, and that wasn't even the essay she wanted to use. She wanted to use this other essay, but she's like, well, I've got this one. And I read that one and I was like, oh dear God. And I just almost broke into tears. And I was like, you're done. You're good. Which is a rare and beautiful thing. But when a rare and beautiful thing happens, show it. So the reason I use the best essays like that is because I think we learn more from them. So I'm just clicking through some of these things. Let's see. Somebody else. Can we get a copy of that essay? You have a copy of that essay, and you'll have a copy when I email you the recording. I'll reattach the PDF. Carrie asks, please explain more what you mean by unusual language examples. By unusual language, I just mean craft. I just mean that Kubla Khan's fountain in the Santur essay, or in the breaking up with mom essay. Oh my gosh, that moment where she says, a tiny bird of a woman with clipped wings. She describes her mother as a tiny bird of a woman with clipped wings. That's unusual language. Will every student do that? No. That's why it's not a requirement for me of a great essay. I think it helps in a standout essay. And like I said, I think it's the more usual the topic, the more we need some other stuff to make it a standout essay. But those are some examples. Let me know if you want more, Carrie. Christine's asking, will you expand at all about connections? But you asked that a half hour ago. So let me know if I've expanded on that enough for you, if you'd like me to expand more. Catherine's asking, where do we access the PDF? Catherine, I will email it to you so you'll have it. Let's see. Ruka, when the thing cut out, asked, are you in ancient Babylon? I think I did go to ancient Babylon for a minute. Let's see. Someone offers, my most heartbreaking moment was when I had seizures as a baby. Another share, I never felt loved by my father. I only felt true love from my mother. My mother is my comfort. Thank you for that share. What else? I love everything about theater. What do you need jumps to extracurriculars? What do you need? Kirsten, tell me what you mean by that. I read, what do you need jumps to extracurriculars? I'm not sure what you meant by that. So let's see. I'm clicking through the other ones. That was written a while back. Okay, let's see. Your sample students all seem so extraordinary. Oh, we already talked about that one. Kathy, you asked about unusual language. Let me know if I clarified that up. If I cleared that up for you. Christine says, thank you for your generosity and insight. You're welcome. Thank you. Matthew says, what if I don't have a very in-depth topic? And maybe you heard me say this, Matthew, but then make sure that your connections are interesting and unusual and that aren't obvious. So if you're writing about, something that's and that's going to take some time. You may not figure that out in the next 5 minutes, but unusual connections, like the kind that I was talking about, like the kind that are made in the Santur essay, like you can't predict what that kid's going to say. Jade asks, do you expect payments from PayPal for your workshops? Yes, I do. Let's see. What else? What do I consider taboo topics? Okay, here's an interesting one. Eva asks, what do I consider to be taboo topics? Eva, almost nothing. And I'll say more about this in the July workshop, and I don't mean that to sell, but it's something that it takes a while to explain. But here's the 30-second version. To me, what makes a topic taboo? Gosh, okay, let me answer this carefully. It's all about how you tell it. It's mostly about how you tell it. Okay, so actually, let me back up. Some potentially taboo topics are eating disorders, depression, violence, sexual abuse. The things that we would expect, the things that make us cringe a little bit, just to hear me say those things, But if you write about them in a way, there's a way to write about each of those things that can make it an amazing essay. One of the best essays that I've read is called the knife essay. I named it that because it's about a student who cuts herself. Taboo topic, absolutely. But the way that she talks about this, and it's in my book, sorry. So the way that she talks about this can really make that, really makes that essay stand out. And here are some keys for that. When it comes to the challenges, and this is how I approach every challenges essay, is I tell students, get the challenge into the first part of the essay and then move on as quickly as you can. So give us just enough information to understand the context and then move on. If it's violence, physical abuse, we don't need the essay to open up with, as I looked at, the blood pouring down over the linoleum floor and I saw my sister's face crying and screaming out. We don't need that. We need I experienced physical abuse at the hands of my father when I was young, right? That's it. And that we get it, and then we can move on. So almost nothing is taboo. It's all about how you treat it. Having said that, do you have to tread carefully? Absolutely. Nancy asks, how will this summer's workshop mirror the NACAC workshop? So the NACAC workshop is going to be a very fast workshop. So I'm going to be giving some kind of tidbits. It's kind of like, if you can imagine it's like a sampler platter. And I'm not using the NACAC workshop to sell my webinars, but it's just, how I kind of move through this stuff really fast. The week-long workshop in the summer is going to allow us to process a little bit more each of the things and to go in depth. Nancy says, is it ever bad to get too vulnerable? Will we look like a freak if we go deep about our depression and anxieties? Possibly, Nancy, is my straight answer for you. Yeah. And so the key to that, so you don't need to give all the details, you just need to give us enough to understand something about what the challenge is. So we don't need all the deep, dark details. Okay. Let's see. What else? Kirsten asks, how in depth will you go with examples and exercises for your mini workshops in July and August? So I wouldn't even call them mini workshops. I'm going to go as in depth as we can, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to space out the exercises so we have time to go in depth on these. So the answer, Kirsten, is I'm going to go as in depth as we can. And I'm bringing some new materials. So I'm getting certified in hypnotherapy and neurolinguistic programming. And so some of the exercises are going to be some guided visualization and meditations. So that's some stuff that I'm excited to explore. It's something that I have some experience with. My wife is a certified hypnotherapist. So I've got some new exercises that I'm going to share too, that I haven't been able to share before. Let's see. Some people are saying they can't download the handout. Don't worry, you'll get it in the email that I'll send. Elizabeth says, how do students choose which 4 essays? Well, it's an art, not a science, right? And the answer is, and actually, if you go back to the part on elasticity, variety, and don't leave money on the table, those are my answers for that. How do you choose which topics are the most elastic, meaning which topics are going to help you talk about the greatest variety of values? Second, which topics are going to be different enough from each other so that those values you talk about are different from each other? And don't leave money on the table means talk about the things that probably the reader in reading your application activities list would want to know more about. Cynthia asks, would you say there are certain off-limit topics? So maybe I've answered that question. I hope I've answered that. So the off-limit topics are mostly, yes, potentially, but it's mostly in how you treat them. Let me know, Cynthia, if I didn't answer your question when I was speaking to the other person who asked something similar. Karen asks a logistics question. What's the platform I work with students on? Google Docs, Edwell? Yeah, I use Google Docs. I don't use Edswell or College Essay Organizer. I'm open to it. I like Edswell, and I haven't met I like Alex. He's really cool. And so I think those are great products, but I don't happen to use those. I just use a spreadsheet. I use kind of my own system. Anushi asks, where to address ADHD and limitations like that? Well, it depends. So one place you can address that is your additional info section. If you want to make sure that they know that about you, but you don't want that to dominate a whole essay, especially if you're writing for the Common App, then you could put that in your additional info section. I had a student last year who had a hearing impairment. She didn't want that to be her main thing, so she just mentioned in her additional info in a few lines. And she got into Yale. That's not why she got into Yale, but my point, I don't know what my point is there. I think I was just kind of bragging, and I was really excited because that was her dream school. So how do you address, so that would be my answer to how to address that. If you want to address it, okay, so here's my slightly longer answer. So in your main essay, let's say if you decide that ADHD is your deepest story, and on the workshop in the week long, we'll talk more about what it means what is your deepest story. There's a whole session on that. But If you decide that ADHD is the focusing lens that is going to help you go into the parts of yourself that are the most fertile and most interesting and most useful, and you can talk about a variety of values, it's elastic, then how do you talk about it? Is the answer to the whole writing process that you're going to be going through. So the answer to how to write about it is not something that I could say, you should write about it like this. What I would say, just kind of broadly speaking, is make sure that it's not, ADHD all the way through the essay. It's about how ADHD has served you. Ask yourself, what superpowers have you developed based on your ADHD? Why is having ADHD awesome? What do I not know about ADHD that you know? What is it like having it? All those things would be interesting to me. So those are some thoughts. Emma asks, how much work do you suggest we do over the summer? Should we aim at finishing all of our essays? Emma, you finish as many as you can. And the number that you'll be able to finish will be your UC essays, because you know what the prompts are. You've got them already. And your Common App main statement, which you've got the prompts for already. You know what that is. You can also finish your activities list. I recommend doing the UC one first because it's a little bit longer, and then cutting that down for your Common App. Whatever doesn't fit in your Common App activities list, put it in your additional info section. You won't be able to finish all of your supplements because a lot of those won't be released until supplements are the additional essays for all the private schools you'll apply to. You won't be able to finish all those because they come out in August usually. So try and have the UC and Common App done by August 1st. So when those supplements start to come out, you can get started on those. But then you're only leaving for yourself in the fall your supplemental essays. Oh, by the way, here's something else that I'm doing. And I haven't advertised this yet, but in September, I'm doing a webinar series on the incomplete guide to the supplements. So, those supplemental essays that you need to write, I'll be doing a kind of like a best of. And it's called incomplete because I can't do all however many hundreds of supplements there are, but I'll be doing the ones that you'll probably need to write. Let's see. Another question. Why does the essay Breaking Up with Mom sound like a play? Jade, why does it sound like that to you? Just curious. To me, it sounds like, I don't know, she loves theater, so she was able to put in some dialogue. Maybe that's why. She's interested in drama. I don't know, it didn't occur to me that it sounded like a play. To me, it sounds like a really well-written short story. But I acknowledge that, and I think that's a cool idea, probably because she loves theater. Talia asks, how big of an impact do essays have on the college process, especially UCs? Do they really consider it? So my second question is easier to answer than the first. Do UCs really consider it? Yes, is the short answer. And this is coming from, different UC admissions officers. And if you meet one, ask them too and see what they say. But the answer I always get is yes. And also because I want to believe that the work that I'm doing with students makes a difference. So I choose to believe that yes, it matters. Is it the only thing that matters? No. What matters most are your grades and your test scores. That's what, and this goes for the UCs in many schools, and you can look this up. How much do grades matter? NACAC report, and you'll see based on a survey that went out to lots and lots of colleges, just how much do the essays matter? It's hard to quantify this, and I don't want to speak the exact numbers, but for most schools, it's third to your grades and your test scores. Now, that's not true for all schools. Some schools are test optional. So you can kind of read between the lines there. Essays might be important for that school. If a school is giving more supplements, that might be a hint that the essays really matter. They really want, to know about your writing. For liberal arts schools, like Reed College, because I know a couple of people who work there, the essays are important. But not for every school. I mean, I've also heard admissions officers say, not so much. If they've got the grades, they're in. For some schools, if you've got a 3.1, you're in, and you don't even need to write an essay. So some schools don't even require essays. So that's my answer to that question. Eugen asks, for the July 10th through the 17th seminar, is it only talking about the UC essay or also the Common App essay? So just to clarify, Eugen, the July 10th through 17th is only Common App, and the August 6th through 14th is only UCs. So I'm covering both. I think it would be tough to work on them both at the same time. We could have done that last year, and I did do that with my students last year, but you can't double them this year in the same way, I think. Sarah asks, can we write about a quote unquote cliche topic like immigration or defeat? So I don't know that I'm not sure what those topics are. Like if it's about immigration, generally speaking, Sarah, I wouldn't write about that. But if you're writing about about what immigration has meant in your life, that could be interesting. But whatever you're writing about, it's not what you're writing about. What you're writing about is you. So And you are not cliche. You just got to get into the details of what makes you different. And I know that sounds kind of cliche, but defeat is not an essay topic. Defeat might be a way that you felt in a certain experience, but the topic would be something else. So maybe you could say a little bit more, Sarah. But usually the answer is in the telling. It's like how you treat any of these themes. So immigration, or I guess it is a topic generally speaking, but I'm not sure what the topic would be for the essay. It should always be about you. Kim asks, what do you do with a student who only has sports on their activities list and all of their anecdotes revolve around sports? Good question. Okay, first of all, let's see what else is there. So we're going to continue poking and prodding and finding, well, what else are we going to put on this activities list? So hopefully not all 4 UC essays, if we're just talking about the UC essays, are about sports, because there's going to be something else there. And that's my answer, Kim, is that the work needs to happen to find other topics, because that student is more complex than sports. It might seem at first blush or by looking at the activities list that it's all sports, but there is more to write about. And it will be really important, I think, to write about other things just to show dimension. If that's not a satisfying answer, let me know and I'll see what I can come up with. Kim asks, what do you think of the Costco essay? So this essay, which went around on social media, is an essay that a student wrote and got into some good schools. And it's an essay about how, it's a montage style essay where she takes Costco and she kind of goes around and talks about different things related to Costco. But like, any essay, any good essay, it's about her. It's not about Costco, right? So what do I think of it? I only read it once, and I read it kind of fast on my phone while I was in between things. So I don't remember it a ton. I remember thinking it was pretty good. I don't remember thinking it was like super deep. I'll tell you one essay I did really love. The New York Times asked for a bunch of essays, and a bunch of people wrote in, and there were a couple essays. There's one essay about, it's the first or second one. A girl was like interacting with her father, and they're like she talks about the earth and the clay red, and it just made me cry. So that essay I loved. Costco essay, I went, oh, cool story, nice essay. Colleen says, sometimes I find showing kids other people's essays makes them terrified. Do you use examples? I use examples, and I use them a lot, Colleen, because we can move past the terrified part. And I can tell students, hey, this essay took 15, 20 drafts. Hey, it is what it is. But there's something on the other side of that fear. And because I'm inviting them to dig more deeply into themselves, I'm showing where to find their answer. So they pretty much, in my experience with students, they get out of comparison mode pretty quickly. Because I'm also telling them, how can we steal from this and use some of these techniques? What is this person doing that we can steal from? What can we use? So I never worry about that. Let's see. Claire asks, how do you work with crafting writing with students whose English is their second language? Great question. So Claire, in the 3 things that I talked about, unusual topic, unusual connections, unusual language, first 1 and 2 are still possible. We can still brainstorm an unusual topic. Maybe we won't find it, but we can still definitely come up with unusual connections. Will we get to unusual language, meaning crafted, beautiful poetry? Probably not. In fact, we probably shouldn't. If it's starting to get there, it's probably because, the college, not you, but the college essay coach's hand is way too much in it. So with students like that, I recognize that there is a limitation on how, perfect that, will it have Hanging Gardens of Babylon? Maybe, certainly maybe, but it might not have Tiny Bird of a Woman with Clipped Wings if your English is a second language. So what I say is still focus on encouraging students to make those uncommon connections, because, every student is capable of that, at least, every student probably that you're going to be working with. And then go from there. So again, focusing on uncommon connections. Let's see. Please email me the PDF, as I said I would. What are your thoughts on students writing about serious topics like suicide, mental health issues, or domestic violence? So Lori, I answered that a little while ago. Let me know if that didn't answer your question, but I think I did. So Meg says, for me, a cliche often begins by a student wanting to write about an activity already listed in their activity section having a hard time going, quote unquote, deep. How do you inspire students to tell a different story than one described on the activities section, or as you help them to make the unusual connections? So the short answer is, I do it by the ways that I just showed you. Let me see. How do I inspire students to tell a different story? I tell them, write a different story. What else you got? And that's frustrating sometimes at first because they're like, I don't know what else I've got. It just takes more time. So I would say, like I say to myself, just be patient. We will find it. Sometimes we find it. Usually we find it. Sometimes we don't find it. And that's really frustrating. And we just kind of try and pick something and we do the best we can. And that's what we got. And we got to let go, right? But, usually if we're pushing, a lot of times if it's boring, it's because the student is really not engaged in the topic. But I got to believe everybody's got something. So some other things that I do is I encourage students, if they have nothing to write about why they want to study what they want to study. So on my website, the Type B essay, that gives you a cool way to brainstorm an essay, and that'll give you something to write about, an ending for your essay. And then it's all about making uncommon connections and values to get to why you want to do what you want to do. I have a lot more to say about that, but we've got a bunch more questions. I want to try to get to some more, but how do I help them make unusual? Let's see. Yeah, that's my short answer to that. What are some great pointed questions or pieces of advice you ask after a student gives you a usual first draft, especially without dampening their spirits? Andrea, great question. I have a whole session on this. So the short answer, I have a whole hour long dedicated to how to deal with a first draft and some things that you can say and things that you can do. Let me try and remember a few of the key points. So one thing is, don't actually give your opinion first. Ask the student what he or she thinks first. Because chances are the student knows what's wrong with it. Here's another tip. If the essay doesn't reveal a lot about the student, ask the more neutral question. So what do you learn about this student from this essay? A third thing I do, and this will be included in this, but I didn't do this on a past webinar, is I have this, what's called the Great College Essay Test. Okay, June 30th, I'm going to do a new webinar, and I'll send you an email about it. And it's called the Great College Essay Test, and it's got 4 things that you can look for. So I just have them take the Great College Essay Test. In fact, I have them give themselves the Great College Essay Test, and it's got 4 qualities to look for and to rate themselves on 1 to 10. How well did they do? And then I agree or disagree. And chances are the student knows that there's something wrong with the essay, but they can't quite articulate it. I like to, and I almost never read the essay before I'm with the student. I like to have them read the essay aloud, or I read it aloud with them so we can kind of hear it as a story. When the student hears the essay aloud, sometimes that'll help. I also will sometimes ask, sorry, I'm going on and on about this, but I have a lot to say about it. I also sometimes ask, how long did you spend on this? Because sometimes they'll be like, 20 minutes. And then they'll kind of acknowledge I didn't really work hard on this. And then I don't worry about crushing their spirit as much. So Andrea, I would love for you to join the webinar so I can talk to you more about that. And I would love to hear your ideas about how you do it. How do students best boil down Common App essays into UC? It's going to be so easy, Catherine, because whatever they write about for their Common App is going to work for the UC essays because there are so many to choose from. So how do you boil it down? That's something that I'll address in the UC one. It's a great question. I really appreciate that. What are my thoughts on that right now? If it's a narrative essay, just focus on, I mentioned this earlier, what was the challenge? What did I do about it? What did I learn? If it's a montage essay, uncommon connections. If you can have them articulate those uncommon connections, it's going to be super easy to boil it down because those are going to be the juiciest bits. And it'll be even easier to cut it down, not even easier, but it'll also be easy to cut it down for a 150 word extracurricular essay. So the more that they're focusing on those uncommon connections, the better. It's almost 7:30. The webinar might cut out. If it does, I apologize. We will formally end the webinar here and I will release you. But for those of you who'd like to stay after class, I'm going to keep answering these questions because I'm having a good time. Anushi asks, how would you approach uncommon essays like the Rice essays or Stanford essays? Anushi, my short answer to that is sign up for the September webinar because I will be addressing the Stanford essays and I will maybe do the Rice essays as well. The Stanford essays, if you Google how to write the Stanford roommate essay, I wrote a whole post on that and you can find out that. The intellectual vitality essay, God, how do I explain this in like two seconds? The intellectual vitality essay, I have students think about that as like, what is a really smart idea that you really love? So think of this as the brain essay. And then the what matters to you and why essay is the heart essay. That's my short answer to that. In terms of techniques and how we do that, you'll have to sign up for the September webinar. Christine asks, you got any fiction suggestions for students that have helped their writing? Grapes of Wrath is one. You know, Christine, I don't tend to suggest fiction to improve writing. I just tend to try and help them improve it more directly by teaching them screenwriting structure. So if I were to recommend some things, I loved J.D. Salinger, in high school and college. So I would recommend something other than Catcher in the Rye, because I love everything else besides Catcher in the Rye. I like Catcher in the Rye, but I love everything else. I don't know if that's going to improve your writing, though. I don't know, Christine. I don't know how, for me, that doesn't, I don't know if that would improve a student's writing. You know what? David Foster Wallace. That's my answer. I would recommend David Foster Wallace. And that's kind of like a rated R recommendation. Just heads up. Matthew asks, what if I don't have a very in-depth topic? So I addressed that on the webinar. So when you watch the webinar again, Matthew, when I send you the recording, rewind to the part where I talk about this, where I talk about what to do if you have a usual topic. Let's see. Meg says, I don't know what that one is. Okay. Do you recommend students writing UC prompts first and then expand one of the stronger topics to a Common App response, or the reverse, or does it depend? I recommend the reverse, Celeste. I say write your main essay first, write your Common App, make that one awesome and full of details in life. And this is my experience, like the Breaking Up with Mom essay, because I think it's easier to cut it down than to expand on it. I think when we expand on essays, we're oftentimes adding fluff. I think it's better to do the long version and make that really awesome and then go, okay, well, which are the awesomest parts? So that's my recommendation for that. Any additional resources for students that don't like to write, especially to get them to write unusually? Yes, Carrie, everything on my website. Go to my website and click on free, the free resources page. Go to the 1 hour guide to writing your essay. I've not found a student yet, and tell me if you find students that doesn't respond well to that. And that sounds really kind of like highfalutin and like I'm really bragging here. But what I mean by that is even students who don't write can use these exercises, like the objects exercise and the values exercise. They can listen to the audio there and go through that and look at the different types of essays and go, okay, I think I have some sense of this. Another resource is the feelings and needs exercise. How do you get them to write unusually? Push them on the feelings part and the needs part, and then the values part. Push them in those 3 columns to think about, actually push them in all the columns to really go deeper and to think about things they haven't thought about. That's how you do it in a workshop setting. In a one-on-one setting, keep asking the question, If you want more resources for what good questions to ask, the ones in the feelings and needs exercise are, to me, the 6 best questions for brainstorming an essay, particularly narrative structure essay. But you can Google 100 brave and interesting questions, and I've got 100 great questions for getting more information from your students and just getting closer to people in life. Haruka asks, can we use these handouts if we work with students? Yes. I would love it if you said, hey, these are from the College Essay Guide. Check out his website. But yes, you may. Let's see. Kwan says, Cindy, yes, I will send you the PDF. Everybody keeps asking for the PDF. No one else needs to ask me for the PDF. I will send it to everybody, I promise. Do interesting topics like the Santour have more of an advantage over a boring topic such as lacrosse? Well, Matthew, what do you think? Would you be more interested in reading a Santour essay or a lacrosse essay? Who knows? I mean, it depends on if the Santour essay is interesting. You could write a really boring Santour essay and you would get points because it's an unusual instrument you play. And maybe your school needs a Santour player, but it could be that the lacrosse essay is just much more interesting. How is it much more interesting? The uncommon connections. It's the second thing that I talk about after the Santour essay. The book is coming out, Carrie, to answer your question, and July 1st, you can pre-order it on Amazon. Kim asked, do you always have your students make a title for their essays? Kim, I never have them do it. I make the titles after the fact. Let's see. Have I had exceptions to that? Yeah. In my book, there's an essay called If Ink Were Ants. No, that's not true. No, the Barbie and what is it? It's Barbie and the Patriarchy, or Barbie versus the Patriarchy, or something like that. That's one example of a student who had a title. But all the other students that I work with, we never have titles. I tell them to get the title it should be in the soup of the essay. It should be in the essay. We should be able to, it could be useful, especially in a short essay, to sort of, give a caption, a way of thinking about it. Let's see. Jade, when did you realize you had a gift for helping students? How did you find the depth of their soul in their essay? Jade, I think it was 2003 when I was first working with students on essays. And I was bringing in my screenwriting stuff that I was learning from writing screenplays. And I was like, this stuff with students is so much better, so much more fulfilling, so much more interesting. So I would say the short answer is 2003. When I really got it was when I did my Myers-Briggs and I read the book Do What You Are, and I found out that the heart of my type is about helping people realize their potential. And then I thought of this essay thing as a much bigger thing, that I'm not just, and another time was when I was at the Interchange Counseling Institute and we studied narrative therapy, and I saw this essay writing stuff as a kind of therapy, a really powerful, deep form of framing past experiences in useful ways that help us lead a happier, more fulfilling, amazing life. So those were 3 moments. Dario says, what's your general formula for writing these kind of essays? Dario, I'm not sure what you mean by these kind of essays, so I'll have to pass on that question. Maybe you can clarify if I can get to it at the end. What's missing in the steps between what I did gain? Kirsten, I missed the rest of your question. Anushi asks, are there limited spots in your personal statement webinar? I want to attend but may have a conflict. Anushi, if you have a conflict, don't worry, because I'm going to send you the recordings. So you have no conflict. Craig says, what are your feelings on promoting unusual language versus promoting an applicant's authentic voice? Craig, tell me more about what you mean about authentic voice. Does that mean the way people talk? Because I don't think we write necessarily the way we talk. We could, but I'm not sure what you mean by authentic voice. And so tell me more about that. I know I'm kind of putting the screws to you because I think that's a really hard thing to identify. But I also want to get, I guess, in the like just to use my authentic voice. Like, I'm not sure what you mean. Here's I think an answer to your question. If a student is writing with fancy vocabulary words and that student doesn't use fancy vocabulary words, I'd say only do that a little bit and not too much. It should sound like the student. Here's my answer. Here's my short answer. If the student should be able to read it aloud, and a friend should listen and be like, yeah, that's awesome. That sounds like you. There could be some fancy words in there, like defunct, but not too many, maybe 3. That's my answer. Kirsten says, how do these extracurriculars fill the need? I think, Kirsten, I got your notes when you were making notes. Catherine, how do you help kids who don't have the skill to achieve uncommon language? Catherine, I focus on the uncommon values, the uncommon connections. I don't worry with all my students. I mean, I probably only 20% of the students I work with are able to kind of get to that higher level. So we're talking about most of my students. I'm working on just the uncommon values. Surprise me. I'm also working on a structural level, with all the stuff that you've seen in my past webinars in terms of structure. Eva says, looking forward to the summer workshop. Awesome. Jacob asks, can I have a very unusual topic justify not having very unusual connections? For example, I mentor inmates at Soledad State Prison. Amazing. Unusual. Great. Can I talk about how that inspires compassion, awareness, and common humanity, which you would expect from mentoring experience? I don't want to lose my reader in 350 words or leave them wondering why I spend all this time in a prison. You can do more, Jacob. So yes, write about mentoring inmates at Soledad State Prison. But I would say we already know that it's going to inspire compassion, awareness, and common humanity. Like, that's kind of going to be probably obvious. I would encourage you to think about what are some unusual things that I wouldn't expect that you've learned there. How has it made you, I don't know, riff on this, but, go for don't be lazy with your awesome, unusual topic. Christine asks, will you be dealing with the coalition app prompts? Christine, it's topic of your choice is one of the choices. So the answer is yes, I will be dealing with the coalition app prompts, but not directly, because my belief is that we don't have to write for a particular prompt. And if I've sent a different message, I apologize on this webinar. But my thing is figure out what your topics are, write a great essay, and then decide which prompt it works best for. I probably should have said that at the top. So I will not be dealing with them directly, but yes, whatever topic that students write on in the 2 workshop series, that's going to work for the coalition prompts, because there's a topic of your choice. Is it bad if the topics are too academic? Kevin, it's all in how you address them. If most of the essay is dealing with the topic, then that's bad. It should be mostly about you. The topic could be really academic, like, historical, history, or the history of the Russian Revolution, but it should be about how the history of the Russian Revolution has formed you and shaped you and changed you. So don't write about the topic, write about you. Use the topic to write about you. Elizabeth asks, going from Common App essay to UC essay leaves you with 1 essay. What are the next 3? So Elizabeth says, meaning how do you choose? So the answer to that, and Elizabeth, you might have missed the beginning of the webinar. How do you choose between those 4 topics? You choose the ones with the most elasticity, the ones that will give you the most variety in your topics, and the ones where you make sure you're not leaving anything on the table, meaning write about your extracurricular activities, write about a challenge you faced if you haven't. So all those things that I talked about at the beginning, that's how you choose. Again, it's an art, not a science. There's not a way for me to be like, you should write about this. Actually, if you Google how to decide which extracurricular activity to write about, I did a post on how to choose between your rockstar achievements and your passion projects. So that's probably a better answer to your question. Bailey asked, will you give us your slides? Yeah, I'll send you the slides. Cool. Well, again, feel free to leave if you want. I'm going to keep going because I feel like it. Audrey asked, what were the first 2 ways to find your topic? So Audrey, you'll just need to see the recording to see those. Daria asks, a narrative structure seems to be addressed in the PDF. You're right, it is. Should a student include or exclude issues with anxiety or depression? So Haruka, I addressed that earlier. So go back to the beginning of the Q&A. The short answer is anxiety and depression are okay to write about. I think it's just on how you write about them. Other essay coaches or consultants may disagree. They might think they're completely off limits. To me, nothing is completely off limits, almost nothing. If you killed a person, probably don't write about that. But if you went to jail and learned a lot through that experience, maybe that might be interesting. Full disclosure. Anyway, you see I'm kind of joking there, but my point here is that I'm interested in the challenge of what is the thing that's really changed your life the most, that's been your dominant, deepest story. Again, it depends with the student. If the student has been able to process the anxiety and depression and is kind of on the other side of it. If a student is still dealing with it, I'll speak to the students directly. If you're still dealing with anxiety and depression, you could write about it if you're able to say some stuff about it, about what you've learned. But if you're still in it, you're still experiencing it, it might be tough. And what I do is, sometimes we'll start writing about that and we'll find, it's too close. We can't write about this right now with enough distance. I forget who it was, Keats or some poet, that said that poetry is about writing, looking back. And so the question for students in writing about these topics is, do you have the ability to look back on it? Sometimes if you have enough time and enough one-on-one space with the student, you can help them begin to look back on it and kind of do some of that counseling work, or, you can refer that out to somebody else. It just depends on how much time we have. Also, I'd say you can write about anxiety and depression if you've got time to process them. But if it's like a week before the deadline, it might not be the best topic. Alexia asked, did I talk about the new things that I heard from Mrs. Young earlier today? Yeah, I did. I've talked about everything that she has talked to me about. Haruka asked, do fairtest.org students value the essay disproportionately more? And I think you mean colleges. Yeah, schools. I can't speak generally about that. You'd have to ask every school individually. So do test optional schools value other things more than standardized tests? And by the way, what he's talking about, if you go to fairtest.org, you get a list of test optional schools that don't require the SAT or ACT. Is it safe to say that those schools value other things more than standardized tests? I think that's safe to say. Is the essay one of those things? It is. So that's my qualified answer. Haruka says, I heard huge schools value essays less. Is that true? Again, I can't speak generally based on all of them. I know that Michigan, which is a pretty big school, values essays because I've talked to a few of their admissions officers. But do they all? UCLA is a pretty big school, and I think they care about the essays, at least some. So it's hard to speak generally. Would a small liberal arts school spend more time with your essay because they have fewer essays to read? And maybe, but it's hard to speak generally. Follow-up question. On the July 10th to 17th workshop, how many students do I expect to attend? Will students have sufficient time with you during the workshop? Yujun, I honestly don't know how to answer that question. I have, how many? I'm probably 20 or 30 folks signed up. So, more will sign up. You'll get, the Q&A will be like this. But the good news is you'll have a writing partner to work with throughout the process. So you'll get some time with me, and you'll get a lot of time to ask me specific questions about your essay, though. So when you're working through the essay, you can say, hey, I'm struggling with this particular thing. How can you help me figure it out? And I will give, based on how much time we have, I'll give you some thoughts and ideas on that. Do you think students can share essays with friends in small groups, or do they get too self-conscious? Haruka, in my experience, yes. It depends on the friends, but sometimes Peers can be great writing partners. Jade asks, what type of stories make you weep? Jade, I've got 24 in my book coming out, and not all of them made me weep. I'd say maybe 8 of them made me weep. One of them is the breaking up with mom essay. Another one is the brother essay, I shot my brother essay. If you Google I shot my brother essay, the dying bird essay, if you Google both of those, I shot my brother and dying bird, you'll find those on my website. And those essays make me weep. Jade says, some students like myself go through writer's block. I totally hear you on that. Let's see. If a student worked on a political campaign, do they discuss this? Politics off limits? Again, it's like an academic topic. If the essay is truly about the student and what the student has done. I had a student who was huge into politics. That was his whole life. We were trying to find some other more vulnerable stuff. But ultimately, he's like, you know what? This is my life. This is what I love. This is what I do. And everything on my application is about this. I should probably write about it. And I said, great, let's do it. The problem with that essay is that it wasn't super vulnerable because it was more kind of externally focused and it was about ideas. So it was more head rather than heart. So the challenge with those is to try, how do we get it into the heart space? One of the ways to do that is by focusing on the values that are really important to that student and why that student is interested in politics in the first place. So that can help. If you Google how to make sure your essay is doing its job, you'll see a little blog, and then at the end, here's an essay that's really doing its job. And there's a student who got involved with, it wasn't a political campaign, but she got involved with an office, a lawyer, I think. And that essay really contextualized the political campaign, or in this case, the law office. So that's one way to do it. And the answer is just make it a small part of the essay. Let's see. Jeff asks, when you brainstorm the Common App personal essay, do you start with a prompt or leave it for later? Jeff, I never start with a prompt because we don't need it. We're writing for the prompt one, which is tell us your story. And so I never start with the prompt. And that's not true. I never start with a prompt on main personal statements, and I won't with the UC essays. I'll show them to students and say, hey, this might give you some ideas, but there are much more interesting ways. And the reason I do that is that I think that students start to get freaked out and worried too much about pleasing an outside authority, or what do they want, as opposed to what do I have. So the 8 exercises that I talked about in the beginning are all geared towards what do I have to offer. And then you write a great essay, and then you just pick a prompt. The exception to that is supplements. Supplemental essays, if they're asking, why do you want to go to a particular school? You need to answer that question. You can't write about your, grandmother unless, it really clearly answers the prompt. So that's the exception. Once you're in final drafts, ask Jan, how do you handle significant grammar and structure issues? Jan, I try to ask questions, or, sometimes like grammar, if it's unclear, I'll just say clarify, but I think the thing that I type most is clarify. So I'll just highlight it and I'll just basically say, I don't understand this part, make it better. And one way that I have students do that is I tell them to read it aloud. And usually when a student reads a thing that doesn't make sense aloud, they get that something is messed up. And so I tell them to fix it. Do I suggest direct things like write this instead of that? I try not to. Sometimes when we're right up against the deadline, I'm like, I think what you mean is this word, but I try not to get that into it. I try to ask more questions and basically say, hey, there's something here you should probably look at. Let's see. Jade says, would you suggest free writing for students who may seem uncomfortable? Only focus free writing, Jade, because I find that if students are just free writing and they have no sense of what they should write about, they're just kind of free writing, that tends to be not as productive. And I think that you can give students, even the ones who don't like to write, something more specific to focus on that's going to be more productive. Look at those 8 things that I talked about at the beginning of this webinar. Kim says, I'm on Amazon right now and it looks like I can pre-order your book. Yay, great, please do. I'm trying to be number 1 in my category the week it's released, July 1st, and all the pre-orders count. I think I have to do like 300, so that's what I'm aiming for. Allison says, what advice do you give to parents who want to help their students with their essays? Go away. No, if it's actually a parent, the advice I would give them is take my course and you'll learn how to do it in a way that's kind and useful and actionable and that preserves the relationship. But if I'm working with a student one-on-one and a parent wants to be involved, it's too many cooks in the kitchen. And I'll say this generally, is that if the parent wants to be the primary essay coach, I would say that can be okay. But if they've already got a college essay counselor or a college counselor or an English teacher or a trusted older sibling or somebody else, I wouldn't have two people working on it, because that puts the student in the position of trying to please authority, I think, too often, and trying to please everybody, and that's maddening. Should students, so what role should they take? The student should write the essay until they feel really good about it and can answer why every paragraph, sentence, and word is the way it is, and then show parents, and then show counselors, and then show everybody else. Thank you. You're welcome. Jade says, this is the best workshop I've ever been to. You're amazing. Jade, thanks. You're amazing. Bailey says, thanks. You're so welcome. Thank you. Last two questions. Celeste says, how do you get into the heart of students on the spectrum who are challenged to discuss their feelings? Okay, so this is another section in my July workshop. How do we create a space that's vulnerable? One of the ways I do it, actually, Celeste, here's my answer to this. Google how to create a safe space, how to create safety while brainstorming. And that's a post that I wrote on this. How do I make a space where students can feel like they can go into their heart? The first thing you'll see on that list is that I try and be vulnerable first. And I was doing that with you tonight, letting you know that I was feeling anxious when the sound was cutting out. I talk about my daughter in my workshop a lot because that gets me right to my emotions. It's closely connected to them. So I'm constantly doing with that. I think that has some effect on people. When they see that you can be vulnerable and nothing happens to you, it gives permission for other people to be vulnerable. So that's my first trick. The rest will be on that doc. And the rest, in depth explained, will be on the workshop. Jade says, how many books have you read? And this is my first book. Andrea says, thanks so much. This is a great webinar. I appreciate the resources. Cool. Great to see you, Andrea. Allison says, you're the best. Thanks. You're the best. And you'll be joining my workshop. I'm so glad. Awesome. Those are all the questions. Thank you all for being here. And you made it to the bitter end. Wow, 60 people still on. That's cool. So thank you all for still being here. You're awesome. I'm going to put my baby to bed because I can hear her in the background. And then I'm going to drink some water and probably get a little something to eat. And then I'm going to edit this webinar and try and load it while I'm watching, hopefully, the Warriors pull even with the Oklahoma City Thunder. That's my plan for the night. That's what you can look forward to. That's what you can expect from me. I will have it to you by tomorrow, I expect. Tomorrow night, let's say, at least, because it takes a few hours to upload. Again, thank you. I look forward to connecting with you more. I've got lots more opportunities, and I will email you about upcoming webinars and stuff. Thanks again. Bye-bye.